We're looking at John chapter 18 and verses 19 to 24. This is where Jesus is being questioned by the high priest. And it's a passage that occurs right in the middle of the denials of Peter. So the first denial of Peter occurs before this passage in John, and then the second and third denials occur straight after. So we're looking at a kind of an interlude between those events with Peter. Let me read to you John's Gospel 18, verse 19. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. I have spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I've always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby struck him in the face. Is this any way to answer the high priest? He demanded. If I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? Then Annas sent him, still bound, to Caiaphas, the high priest. So here we have the start of the judicial process, which leads inevitably to the cross. Here we have Jesus now brought before the first of many people who question him. First there's Annas, then there's Caiaphas, then there's Pilate, and then there's Herod, then back to Pilate again. So there's a range of different activities. It takes many hours, as you can imagine, for this to take place. So here we are, 1 o'clock in the morning, dark, cold evening. Most people gathered around a fire in the courtyard of Annas. The high priest questioned Jesus. So here's Jesus brought, bound, with his hands probably tied behind his back, to Annas. And remember, Annas is the guy who is kind of the kingmaker. He's been high priest himself. Most of his sons become high priests as well. Caiaphas is his son-in-law. And so he's the one who really sets the scene. He is the key player as far as the Jewish hierarchy is concerned. He's more powerful, really, than the high priest himself, who is a titular head. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. And when he says high priest here, we shouldn't confuse that with Caiaphas, because Annas was himself high priest at one time and the leader of the high priests, essentially. So the high priest questioned Jesus. What did he question him about? Two things. It says, questioned him about his disciples and about his teaching. Now, those two things are quite interesting. One can only assume what those questions were because we're not given what they are. But to question him about his disciples may be concerned about who are your disciples, who are your close followers, who are the people who are following you. And it may well be that he wanted names, he wanted people who he could otherwise also try before him. And clearly the reason for that is quite straightforward. If you're going to demolish this upstart, uprising, new possible religion which contradicts our traditions, we want to get all of the ringleaders together and obliterate them. Well, at the moment we've got Jesus, so who else is involved in this pact? So he questions them about the disciples and probably their numbers, how many followers you have. Those kind of questions would have come out. Also, he wants to know, what do you teach them? What is your teaching? What are you saying to all these disciples? What is the heart of your message, Jesus? There may be some genuine interest here on the part of Annas as to what it is that Jesus was teaching. Maybe he's curious as to know what this new teaching is about and to hear it from the lips of Jesus himself. Or maybe he's really simply wanting to condemn him out of himself, out of his own mouth, which is more likely as to what's being done here. And Jesus' response is curt, polite, cursory, but it's certainly a response which shows that he's not cowed by this situation, that he's still the master and still in control of what's happening here. I have spoken openly to the world. Implication being is, why are you asking such a question? It should be obvious to you if you've paid any attention at all. I've spoken openly to the world. I don't speak secretly. And what's more, when I speak openly, Jesus replied, I always taught in the synagogues. That's a public forum. I spoke in the temple, in the courtyards there, another public forum, and where all the Jews come together. So none of this was in secret. I said nothing in secret. So why question me about my teaching? The implication here is, what is the motive behind what you're saying? You should know what my teaching is, and my teaching has been given publicly to all. You should know it. So why the questioning about that? And the implication may well be here is that there's a game being played, and I understand the game rather well. You want me to condemn myself out of my own mouth by making the claims that you want me to claim, which is that I am the Son of God, so that you have some basis for your trial. That's why you're asking me about my teaching. Who are you? What are you teaching? What are you saying? Can we find something which can entrap you? Are you saying something seditious against the Roman occupation? Are you saying something against our religion? But Jesus has nothing to do with that. He said all of this is open. And what's more, he says that I've said nothing in secret. In other words, this is not a secret teaching. It's not something hidden away. It's not something which I am promulgating as an underground message. Everything I do is out in the open and transparent. I think that's a message too for us as people. If you want to have a message yourself which you wish to pass to other people, followers of Jesus Christ might wish to do this, then the answer to that is to do as Jesus did, which is to be open about it. No surreptitious approaches, no underhand or ulterior motives about things. Just be open and honest and transparent. And in the nature of a trial here, you can tell that this is really about Jesus condemning himself out of his own mouth, because normally one would have witnesses to this, but they dispensed with the idea of witnesses in this matter. In fact, the whole reason Jesus says, I spoke openly, everyone knows what I said nothing in secret, why question me? The implication is, where are your witnesses? Yeah? Where are your witnesses? If you're bringing a trial against me, where are your witnesses? You hope to get only information from me personally? Where are the witnesses? The witnesses are people I've spoken to. Why have you brought those people along? Ask those who heard me. That's the proper process, to bring witnesses to do that. Surely they know what I said. Now, that's a strong answer to someone with authority. It's not being cowed by them. It's not being subservient to them. It's showing yourself to be at least equal to them, if not morally superior to them. And it's that moral superiority which Jesus shows even to the father of the high priest that brings forth this rebuke. He says, when Jesus had said this, one of the officials nearby, struck him in the face. Remember, his hands are tied behind his back. had no way of defending himself against such an attack as that. You're hitting a defenceless person here, which makes it doubly abhorrent as an act. And the reply was, is that any way to answer the high priest? What way was that? That you didn't show due deference, you didn't show subservience, that you didn't show that you were meek and mild in your approach to the high priest. You didn't submit to his authority and speak in a servile kind of way, which is probably how Annas would have been used to being spoken to, because he was the leader of his people, essentially. So the official struck him in the face, and Jesus gives an interesting response. If I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify to what is wrong. If I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? That's an unanswerable reply. Why? Because it covers all contingencies. Either I said something wrong, or I said something right and truthful. Either I said something false, or I said something which was true. Now, in either case, there is no ground for striking me. In either case. Therefore, there is no ground for striking me at all. What you've done is wrong. If I said something wrong or untruthful, then you should reprove what I say. Deal with the words that I speak. Testify to what was wrong. That is the right way to deal with error and not to strike somebody. And if, on the other hand, if what I said is true, then there was no cause to strike me at all. Now, there's an important small lesson in here as we pass by, but that is that if someone does offend you, say something which you think is wrong, say something offensive, then the inappropriate response is to strike out and attack the person. Very often these days people do attack people. You may attack them with violence, you may attack them with words by denigrating them as people, you may attack them in many different ways, simply because what they say you don't like, or what they say you believe to be wrong. But the correct approach to someone who speaks something which you believe to be wrong is to correct them. In other words, the correct approach to words is more words. The correct approach to a bad argument is a good argument. The correct approach to error and misinformation is reproof. It is not censorship. It is not violence. It is not personal attack or personal abuse. It is dealing with people directly, openly, fairly, and countering abuse and countering error with truth. That's the correct way to deal with things like that. And if I said something that was truthful, then there was no ground. And of course Jesus did only speak the truth, and there was no ground, therefore, because all he'd said was that there are other people who are witnesses to what I said. You don't need to ask me. In fact, the proper procedure here, and really this is what's behind this, Jesus reminding Annas, the proper procedure is for you to call witnesses. The proper procedure is not for you to try to elicit from me things which I might condemn myself with. The proper procedure is bring your witnesses. And what I've said in the open, so you shouldn't have any problem getting them. So here we see Annas, at this point, gives up the questioning. He decides that I can't get anywhere with this particular man, probably because he realizes that the answers which this person gives are actually correct answers, truthful answers, and wise answers as well. And the way in which this person speaks is a way which can't easily be answered. Annas gives up, and he sends Jesus then, still bound, to Caiaphas, the high priest. And so That's the next stage. And after that, we have Peter's denials, and then we'll pick up the story again when Jesus then comes before